Hi, Janites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. Another interesting episode lined up today, and we're moving back into character studies. I'm sure you guys have already noticed by a few character studies coming out already. But today we are going to be focusing on the character of Emma Woodhouse. So I'm joined by Shruti and Neha from the Novelty podcast. So thank you, ladies. I'm so excited to have you on today.
We're so excited to be here.
Thank you for having us. I'm so excited.
Oh, absolutely. So Emma Woodhouse. Emma Woodhouse, this is how she's described at the start of the novel. This is how she's described at the start of the novel. She is handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and a happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. And really interestingly, in 1815, Jane Austen remarked that she was going to take a heroine whom no one but herself would much like. And I feel like this really strikes a vein that runs through the whole of the Jane Austen community, and that is the likability of Emma Woodhouse. And I think she's very much Marmite as a character. People have very differing opinions on her. So I feel like she's a really just a dynamic character to start to unpack and just kind of address some of these things that do come up. And I saw this great article by Eva Hagen on the Jane Austen Society of North America. They do like different articles, which they're really worth reading, guys. There's some great articles on there. But in one of them, she stated that it can be argued that the vivid personalities of each of Austen's heroines rise above their cultural situations, and Austen presents strong females who are still relatable and instructive to modern readers after over 2 centuries. And I think this is really interesting, particularly for Emma, because the rise of things like the that girl content, main character energy, and this shift that we're seeing in society to women choosing to remain single now, I feel like we're entering this kind of Emma Woodhouse era in the world. And I feel like Emma is probably a character who was chastised back in the day for her confidence and self-sufficiency. But I'm thinking she may finally find her place in 2025. So that's my framing for today's episode. But I'd love to hear your guys' initial thoughts.
I love that take on Emma. I feel like she is situated a little bit outside her time. Like when we meet the whole community of Highbury and everyone's going on, Emma's a little bit like timeless, or she's less moored and locked down into her setting than the other characters are. And I agree. I really wonder what was going on, or kind of what the public consensus was on women's personalities and morality, that Jane Austen thought nobody would like her except her, which nowadays I find that a lot of people love Emma Woodhouse, and it's actually Emma. Fanny that people are like, ugh, Fanny. So yeah, I think entering our Emma era as a society is a great way to put it.
Yeah. If I picture Emma in today's world, I picture her as like the girl that like hosts parties at her house all the time, and like probably in her teenage years like made the 2 single people sit across from each other and then force everyone to play spin the bottle. That's like the Emma that I see.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No, I love that. Yeah, so I'm really excited to get into this. And I really want to talk about that progression as well, of like people disliking Emma to potentially now liking her a lot more as like a modern audience. But before we get into that, the question that I ask all of my guests is, what got you into Jane Austen originally? I don't mind who goes first.
Shruti, you can go first.
Okay. I feel like I usually go first. And it's like, Shruti, you go first. I honestly don't have a very vivid memory of when it started. I know it started with Pride and Prejudice, the book, in our 8th grade English class when we were, so listeners of the Novelty know that we both grew up in the United States and then moved to India in middle school. And so in our middle school English class, I don't think we read any complete books, but we read a lot of excerpts and passages of like Dickens and Austen and a lot of other authors. And the passage that we had of Jane Austen was in Pride and Prejudice, the turn about the room. And I don't know if it was that passage that led me to pick up the book, or if I had already read the book and then loved the passage. But somewhere around 8th grade, I picked up the book. I was like, not at all that girl. I used to posture myself as like the nerdy bookworm. So I would like carry the book around in school and I would like read it under the table, and I'd be like, oh, like I can't even get in trouble if they catch me reading during lessons because I'm reading Jane Austen.
I was
so
they can't tell
impressed.
me off.
Yeah. And so that was my introduction to it. And then I watched the movies and I don't actually know the second book that I read, but somewhere in between high school and college, I read the rest of all of the Jane Austen books and obviously loved all of them.
Hey, do you want to go next? And then
Yes.
I can pick apart you guys' stories. No, I'm joking.
Well, for me, the first half of that story is exactly the same. We were reading A Turn About the Room in our 8th grade English class, and my mom found out that we were doing this, and my mom loves Pride and Prejudice. It's like one of her favorite novels of all time. So of course she was like, "Oh my God, I need to introduce you to everything Pride and Prejudice." So we watched the BBC miniseries, or the BBC show, all the episodes together, and then I don't remember exactly when I read the book, but I did. It was around that time that I read the book. And then I think it was like 2005 was when the Keira Knightley one came out, right? So that one had already come out by the time I had gotten into this phase. So I think my sister was visiting me once, and I was like, "Oh, I'm like reading Jane Austen," and she was like, "Oh, let's watch the Keira Knightley version." So then me and her watched the Keira Knightley version, and we were obsessed. I am still obsessed with that movie. It's like one of the best movies of all time. And I actually still haven't read all of Jane Austen. I read Emma for the first time this year. Absolutely loved it. We did it on our podcast. We did 2 or 3 episodes about Emma. So I'm still experiencing Austen for the first time, which I am really happy and excited about, because I feel like the age that you read Austen really affects your opinion of the book.
Love that 100%. I definitely think that's the case. It's almost like once you have read them, there is that kind of sorrow. I have a deep sorrow about the fact that I'll never get to experience it for the first time again. And I actually read them so long ago that I actually struggle to remember my first reactions to things like, the Wickham situation. Like, did I fall for Wickham? I'm like, I actually can't fully remember what it was like to read them for the first time, especially now I've read them so many times. So I think it's awesome when I meet people like, adults who are coming to some of the Jane Austen novels for the first time, because I'm just like, you're going to have such a different take than I ever would have had.
I kind of wish I read Emma when I was younger, though, so I could compare my opinion, because I feel like I would have very different opinions of Emma as a character when I was 15 years old versus now when I'm 32, 31.
Well, the funny thing is that I remembered the story because I've seen so many adaptations and everything, but I just hadn't gone back to the text for a while. But I do remember that when I read it in high school, I identified with Emma a lot because I think I thought that I had set up 2 of my friends in high school, and I was like, I'm Emma, like, and then I also identified with Emma with the Frank Churchill situation because I feel like this is part of her imagination that I'm sure we'll talk about, but she like creates this image of him, and she like has a crush on what she imagines of him rather than the guy itself. And by the time I was in like junior, senior year, that's how I felt about my first crush. I was like, oh my God, like that was what I did. Like I just like created this vision of somebody. And so it's funny going back to it later because I'm like, yeah, I still identify with this because I can see younger me in Emma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love this. What I'm really fascinated about were you guys moving from the US to India as well. Were you in the school system as well at both sides? Did you see a transition of like what you were studying, like just in general, like what was the difference between them? And you said you read passages of different things. Is that because you were analyzing the text in detail?
Yeah. So we, our schooling's been a little bit of a roller coaster because we moved and we started 7th grade in India. And then we both did the Indian curriculum for 2 years. Then for 9th and 10th grade, we did the British curriculum. The GCSE, but it's IG for like international. And then in 11th and 12th, Neha went back to the Indian curriculum and I did IB, which is kind of like the European AP. So 7th and 8th grade, we didn't read full books. When I got to high school, we did read full books, but Neha, I don't know that you
We
did.
didn't.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. We stuck with passages.
So flip-flopping, but yeah, the passages we did a lot more close reading. And I I don't know. I obviously don't know what it's like here, or in the UK, or in other countries, because I haven't gone through it myself. But I think for a middle school level, I think the excerpts were pretty good, because you can really, like, the teacher can model close reading, and you're not dealing with a whole classroom of kids who have not read a 300-page book.
Yeah. And it kind of opens up like, oh, I like this. We did probably like 15, 20 passages throughout the whole year from different famous novels. And it kind of opened it up to our own interest to read the ones that we liked
Yeah.
instead of forcing everyone in the class to read one book. And then some people like it, some people don't like it. So I agree. I think I like that we did the passages only.
Yeah, that's actually why I brought it up when you guys said, because I was thinking that actually seems like a much better model. Like, I remember, like, we had to read, like, Of Mice and Men. Now, I'm really sorry if any listeners love that book, but it was painful to get through. And we used to have to do, like, oh, it's horrible. It was like, I don't know, it's called like popcorn reading, where you had to go through the room and like different people had to
I
read.
remember that.
We did that
Oh
too.
my God, the stress that used to give me. It's so funny, like, given now that I have like a podcast and I like read out quotes and stuff, but that used to be like my deepest anxiety in life. Like, I loved literature, I loved English, but that really put me off going to like class. Like, I always went because I was also fearful of like not having good attendance, but but yeah, it used to really freak me out. Like, at one point, like, my parents went in and they were like, this gives her so much anxiety, like the thought of being picked to read out. So I just think it's such a horrific system. But I actually agree. Reading passages means that people can actually develop their own reading taste, which I think is so much better. Like, Of Mice and Men, like, I was just lucky that I already loved reading, but that would not have drawn me into the world of books.
Yeah, I'm sure it turns a lot of kids off of classics if you only have 3 to read, and if your 3 are like Steinbeck, James Joyce, and like like if it's just books that are not gonna vibe with you.
Yeah, and especially when you're like in middle school where boys are like, ew, girls, like they're not gonna want to pick up Pride and Prejudice to read. So
No, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I don't think I studied any Austen in high school. It just wasn't on our curriculum. It was on a lot of other schools though, which really depressed me, because I was like, why is my high school not doing this? That's so rude. But I did, obviously, once I got to uni, I got to have a little bit more freedom in what I studied and things. But I love this. I actually think what you were jumping in on there, Shruti, about this idea of Emma's imagination. I know I said we'd come to it, but I feel like maybe we just come to it at the start, because it really made me think about this quote that I saw at the start of my version of Emma in the introduction. I can't remember who it was by. Their second name's Stafford, but I can't remember what their first name is. But they did like this whole introduction. It was mostly about the puns in Austen and like the wordplay, particularly in Emma. But there's also this quote that says, throughout the novel, the reader is both confronted with the illusion of a cozy rural community of familiar figures and unsettled by the realization that these figures have been constructed by the individual imagination, working only with hints from other fictional characters. And it really made me think about this fact that you're saying, like, about Emma's imagination and how that really does form the focus of the whole narrative and just like the book in general. So yeah, I think that's such a good thing that we need to probably touch on to start with, is the framing of Emma as a book around Emma.
Yeah, I think the book starts that way too, because we start with Mrs. Weston's getting married, and so Emma's now bored. And I've seen a lot of discourse online with like articles and think pieces about boredom and how we don't allow ourselves to be bored anymore. We're always like reaching for our phones, scrolling, watching TV, and what it means for creativity and especially creative professions, that you really need to allow your mind to go off on tangents, or kind of work through those things in your head. And I think that's really where it starts with Emma. Like, she's bored, she has no friends, her dad is like, she loves him, but he's really not great conversational partner, and so she's bored, and that's her imagination kind of takes hold of Harriet Smith, and she's like, oh, I'm not seeing what Harriet Smith is, I'm seeing what she could be.
Yes, I love this. And I feel like Mr. Knightley makes that observation as well. Like, he says, I'm trying to find this one. It was like, she will never submit to anything requiring industry or patience, and a subjection of the fancy to the understanding. Like, she kind of like stays a lot on the superficial of things and like doesn't get into the depths of it. Like, it seems like a lack of critical thinking or something, but she genuinely is just like not getting into the depths of things. Like you said, if you don't sit in boredom, if you don't sit like on your own and just like have this time to like work for your thoughts, I've seen online that actually causes like quite intense maladaptive daydreaming, which I think is something Emma really struggles with.
Yeah, when you're talking about this, it reminds me of the 1996 UK version of Emma, the adaptation, and how it goes into those like random dreamlike scenes where she's like picturing Miss Harriet and Mr. Elton together, and she like pictures Harriet and Knightley like running off together, and she has like all these like imagination parts of the movie, because I think that plays a big role in her immaturity as well. Like as a child, you're like thinking about all these things and kind of not letting yourself reel it back in. You're like letting it flow, and I think that shows a lot in that adaptation.
Do you think this is like lack of exposure to the greater world, because they do essentially live in this like goldfish bowl, and I wonder if like a lot of Emma's boredom and also this imagination that she kind of runs wild is just because she doesn't get to experience life outside of Highbury, and so she kind of has to make up scenarios. Like I feel like there's a great scene as well in like the 2009 one at the start where she's playing with the dolls under her table, and I feel like this is in the book as well, where Mr. Knightley says like these people are not your dolls to play with, when he's referring to Harriet and Robert Martin. But I feel like she's not had enough life experience to actually break the habit of her imagination.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I feel like Emma actually likes Highbury, because I think she has this sense of like wanting to control things and like knowing what's going on and like being invited to these parties, and she's comfortable here, that if she was kind of put into a bigger pond, then she would lose that control, and that would make her not really feel as confident and like sure of herself.
Yeah, actually, as we're talking about imagination and Izzy, what you were saying, it made me think of Jane Eyre and the way the book opens with Jane. All she knows is this like house where people are mean to her, and she is constantly imagining these other worlds and other places that she could go. For her, she gets that through the books that she like steals and tries to read. But I found that very similar, that like, okay, obviously very different circumstances. Jane is downtrodden and mistreated, and Emma's like the princess of Highbury. But both of them are kind of haven't seen really anything of the world outside of their little bubble. And then their imagination kind of goes in different directions, where I think Jane Eyre is like, I want to see the world, and Emma's like, I want to create the world.
Yeah.
I love both these points, and I feel like there's something that actually ties back to what we're saying at the start about this kind of that girl aesthetic that we're seeing like blow up now, is that mixture between creation and control, right? Like if you think about, so if people aren't familiar with that girl aesthetic, essentially it's like when you see online like girls like waking up very early, like drinking green smoothies, going to Pilates class, journaling, reading classics. I mean, I'm saying this and then I'm feeling like I'm falling into a lot of these categories. Like I'm not against that girl
I know. I
aesthetic.
was about to say,
am I outing us all right now?
I was gonna say, like, I feel like I'm gonna sound like I'm ridiculing that girl in this episode, maybe, but I'm totally not. Like, I go be you. Like, it's totally cool.
Yeah, and there's actually the emphasis of it is a lot on self-love and just like working on yourself and things. So there is the foundation of it is actually really great. I guess the issue becomes when it falls into the performative, when it's not actually, you're actually working on yourself. It's just this performative stance for social media, and you're focusing on appearance. But I feel like Emma's such a weird character in the sense that she falls into both ways. I think she is both this like performative person in a lot of this stuff has no depth to it. Like, she starts those reading lists but never reads the books. She's creating like this scrapbook with Harriet of these like charades and poems and things. But on the other side, she actually is that girl, because she's mistress of like Hartfield. Everybody swarms her and wants to know what she's doing. Like you said, because she lives in this kind of goldfish bowl, she's never left it. She does preside over everybody, which is like what Mr. Knightley says. And so I feel like she's like this really weird combination of this. She actually is like the perfect combination of this creative control.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Emma's growth is that you can see her like breaking out of that a bit, because to me what one of the problems is with like that girl aesthetic and a lot of different things that happen online or just in general is that a lot of it is looking inward and not outward. There's a lot of focus on the self and not necessarily the self in relation to other people or in relation to the world. And that's how Emma starts. Like she's like, I'm going to do this project, I'm going to match make these people, but it's always somewhat in relation to herself or like the way that she views herself. And you can see that start to crack with a a little bit when she realizes Frank Churchill isn't all what he's chucked up to be, but mostly with the Box Hill scene where she's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, actually, like I'm not just the way that I see myself. Like other people also see me in a certain way, and I exist in this community in a certain way. And I think that is one of the best parts of her arc, that she's able to break out, because it's a hard thing to break out of for someone who's like very self-absorbed and has only seen themselves in a certain way. I think it's really impressive that Emma gets to that point.
Yeah. I kind of like picture it as like Emma as this influencer, but not like online, but like just as a part of this community. Similar to, have you guys seen A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively? You know
Yeah.
how Anna Kendrick like has that weird like blog, video log thing where she like shares recipes with like her people around. I kind of like picture Emma as that more than like an influencer. And I feel like she like in her, a lot of influencers will like promote products or like give advice or like try to help their followers in some way. And and that similarly, I think Harriet is like her project.
Mm-hmm.
And she's trying to like uplift her and like help her, and similar to like what influencers do online. But I think she doesn't like fully grasp her wealth and status and like the freedom that she has to do the things that she does, and she's not able to like understand that Harriet, for example, can't be Emma because of her place in society.
This is such a great point. In I feel like this comes into that idea as well. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, maybe Emma isn't performative, like her idleness isn't performative, essentially. I was like, maybe this is just the product of privilege, because she
Mm-hmm.
literally is, she has a situation in life that nobody else has. Like she literally says to Harriet, I have none of the usual inducements of a woman to marry. Were I to fall in love, indeed it would be a different thing, but I've never been in love. Fortune I do not want, employment I do not want, consequence I do not want. I believe few married women are half as much mistress of their husband's house as I am of Hartfield. Like, this is a privileged situation, and I agree. I don't think she sometimes grasps that in the grand scheme of things. I actually think that's why she has that blunder with Miss Bates, and I think that's why she tries to root for Harriet being with somebody who's, probably not a great match for her, because she probably can't get them. Because I think Emma, yeah, forgets that her position is actually a very privileged one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was thinking when we talked to her earlier, how Emma's very like out of her, she's like timeless, or not even timeless, but ahead of her time, if we want to use that terminology, because I think it's in that conversation with Harriet, or maybe it's in another part where she says, I think she's talking to Knightley, and she's talking about Harriet turning down Mr. Martin.
Martin.
Um, and she says, like, Harriet's young, like, she should not take the first proposal that comes her way. She needs to figure herself out. She needs to figure out what kind of man she likes. And in 21st century perspective, that's very real. Like, that's the advice we give our friends. We're like, don't get married when you're 19. Like, figure out what you like, figure out who you are. But that's not a reality for someone like Harriet in that time and place. But Emma like doesn't recognize the
Mm-hmm.
constraints of the world she lives in.
I actually love that whole argument that her and Knightley have, because I feel like there's so much in there. I actually think it's one of my favorite Emma scenes. I think a lot of it because I'm like, yes, I agree with all the points you're making. But like you said, maybe that is like us seeing it from a modern stance. This is the advice we give our friends. It's not necessarily helpful for someone who's living in the 1800s and like
Mm-hmm.
has no prospects for herself. But even the argument that she makes about Harriet's qualities actually being really desirable for men, I don't disagree with. Like, she literally has this whole thing where she's like, these are not trivial recommendations, because Knightley tries to say, like, it doesn't matter that she's like pretty and like kind and, is willing to go along with things. But Emma says, these are not trivial recommendations to the world in general, for she is, in fact, a beautiful girl and must be thought of so by 99 people out of 100. And it until it appears that men are much more philosophic on the subject of beauty than they are generally supposed, till they do fall in love with well-informed minds instead of handsome faces. A girl with such loveliness as Harriet is certainly, is able to be admired and sought after. And I was like, this is still true. Like,
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Yeah,
privilege is a real thing. I'm like, Emma is not wrong in this conversation.
I loved
Yeah.
that part. I was like, go off, Emma. And I think they put it into Clueless as well. I think at one point Cher says like smart men want to be with dumb pretty girls, something to that effect, which is essentially what Emma's saying. I'm like, Yeah, you're right. And like in so like there's certain moments where Emma really, you can see that she is a thoughtful, like she thinks a lot about things, and that she has certain analytic tools that really just like shine out in these moments of, I don't want to say brilliance because maybe they're not applicable to her time, but she is kind of trying to reach towards something that might be more ideal um or like more truthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well, like we've seen, this is like because she comes from this position of privilege. And I guess one of the things that I find annoying about this is Emma is able to be like, I'm not going to marry anyone. I'm going to stay single. That's what I want. And I can do that. And I'll be able to entertain myself. It's no problem because I'm rich, essentially. Um, but what I don't understand is why she doesn't like outstretch that privilege to her friends, why she's adamant that they must essentially like fall into like the patriarchal control. She's like, but you must marry. Like, I'm gonna set you up with somebody. And it's like Emma has £30,000. Like, I know you couldn't just like have this like commune of women where they go and live together and things, but I mean that sounds awesome, but like probably wouldn't have worked back then. But I'm just like, I wonder why she's so adamant for other people to kind of get locked into marriages in a way that she doesn't like. I think it's fair what she said to Knightley that Harriet doesn't need to accept the first man that comes to her. But then she's constantly trying to find a match for Harriet. She's not just like Harriet could just find someone better in the future. Like she's in no rush. She's young. So I don't quite get like why she doesn't, yeah, support Harriet more to be like, don't rush. I have got you
Yeah.
temporarily.
I don't I struggle with this question too, and I have like two theories, I think. I don't buy into either of them. So let me know what you guys think. But the first one is that, is she trying to like show the people around her, a community, that she is wealthier than them by saying like, "Oh, I can probably get away with not getting married, but you can't, so you should probably go get married." And maybe that version of Emma is like more to the beginning of the novel and not what she is like near the end, but I could maybe see that. And then the second one is, which maybe I buy into this version more, but because she's so young, I feel like she gets like some sort of satisfaction from matching two people successfully, and she's like, "Oh, I did that," and she like that, she doesn't have anything else to do. Like we said, she was bored, and so like she makes all of these like relationships her project, and she, that's her entertainment and her like job, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer except to like again extrapolate to how I was when I was young, and I would get
Mm-hmm.
like some kind of like whatever little pleasure from matching people up, and it was always like, oh, like I have my own standards for who I think is worthy for me, but I can see something that you can't see about yourselves and each other, and so I know that you're worthy of each other.
Yeah, I
I think
totally see
maybe
that.
that might be a little bit of what's going on with Emma, but I also think that the book and Emma are, I don't want to say classist because they're not like beating people down into the dirt, but I think they do adhere to what they believe is correct about class and kind of the social hierarchy.
I agree. But there's another point that Emma makes as well, and I also love this one. And I feel like this might be a little bit more controversial, but when she says to Harriet that Robert Martin should be waiting till he's at least 30 before he gets married because he has things that he needs to consider. He needs to like essentially build himself up before this because he has a two sisters and his mother at home as well. So it's three women already that he's providing for because they couldn't go and get their own jobs and sort of things. So I actually love that Emma voices that. Like, I feel like despite the fact that she is sorted in life, she's not delusional to the fact that other people need to be pragmatic. They need to have like finances in place before they can just like go ahead and start marrying people. And I actually think it
Mm-hmm.
was such a valid point. In
Yeah.
I know that he goes to Miss. I actually love Robert Martin. I know he goes to Mr. Knightley and he's like, "Look, this is my plan." And Knightley's like, "You probably do better, but okay." But I actually think what Emma states is so true, and it makes me think maybe she isn't so delusional with her own experience in life that she actually doesn't recognize the fact that men need to have money to provide for women.
Yeah, I think Emma, the thing about Emma is like, I know Knightley and by proxy us and the society kind of like give her crap for being like, oh, like you're so delusional. But I do think that if Emma were in a completely different social situation, if she were poor and not resourceful and like didn't know her parentage, etc., she might be a lot more like not so vindictive and vicious, but more like a Scarlett O'Hara or an Undine Spragg. Like I really think she is resourceful and like intelligent, and because she's so privileged and has all this money, she can kind of sit back and be like, okay, like this is what I want, this is whatever. But if she didn't have all of that to her name, I don't think she would just like waste away and be delusional about what was going on. She would really like get her shit together.
Yeah, I think we see that in her reaction to when it comes out about Jane and Frank, right? She literally says to Mrs. Weston, she's like, if a woman can ever be excused for thinking only of herself, it's in a situation like Jane Fairfax is. I think that totally just sums up, like, Emma's like, yeah, thank God Jane went for the Smallridge's, like, offer. Because, my goodness, why was she holding out for Frank, who was acting like a total numpty?
So true.
I think so. I think if we go off this, like, idea of, like, what she's doing with Harriet, though, I'm going to throw out my theory, right, that Emma is a total girl's girl. I really think she is. Like, I genuinely think when I read about, like, how she's with Harriet, now I know this might be controversial because I think some people are really adamant that Emma is a terrible friend to Harriet and to other characters as well, that she's just a bad friend in general. But I just don't feel that way. But I'm just like, is this just from my perspective? Because there's certain things that she says that do sound brutal, but sound really similar to things I say to my friends. Like the funniest line where she says, like, to Harriet, like, dear affectionate creature, you banished to Abbey Mill Farm, you confined to the society of the illiterate and vulgar all your life. I wonder how the young man could have like assumed that you would say yes. And I'm like, I know it's so rude because it's Robert Martin, he's a lovely person, but equally I'm like, I could totally see myself saying something like that to a friend if it was like a really awful character, like more like a Mr. Elton type. I'd be like, what? Why did he even have like the thoughts that he could like breathe the same air as you? You're like such a goddess. And I feel like Emma really feels that way about Harriet, even though she's from a completely different walk of life to her.
Yeah, I fully subscribe to this theory. I think the people who say that Emma's a bad friend don't think deeply enough about the realities and complexities of friendship. Like, friendship is not this perfect, like, you always put the other person first kind of thing. It's very complicated. And I think today, I have felt this way. A lot of people have felt this way. When your friend gets married, it changes the equation. Like, obviously, you're so happy for them and you want to support them, but it does change your relationship now. And that's today, when I can still call them up and go visit and there's not these restrictions. But like, if Harriet marries Robert Martin, which she does in the end, that's gonna change if they can even see each other. Forget like changing the equation and like how their relationship is. And I think that's very real for her to like, I'm not saying it's mature, but it's very real for her to selfishly be like, no, like, I just found you, we're having such a great time together, I don't want to lose you to a marriage.
Yeah, I don't know. Emma is such a complex character. Like, I don't have like this like, oh, she is this person. Like, I'm constantly questioning who she is. But don't you think that if she was such a great friend to Harriet, that they wouldn't have lost touch at the end of the book, like Jane Austen mentions?
My theory of that, I think this is actually because what she says is true. I also think Harriet becomes a farmer's wife, right? That is not a passive wife role. Like, she's very much going to have to be hands-on, like getting involved with the business and doing things in a way that Emma, married to Mr. Knightley, will never need to worry about. Like, Emma's concerns is, yes, you know, essentially being like head of the household and like organizing staff and everything, but she has the staff to manage all of the mundane tasks. Harriet won't have that. And yes, she's got like her mother-in-law and the sisters and things, but I still think she'd be so busy. And also, I can imagine they just like, you know, start having children. They're not going to have nannies. Like, Harriet will have so much more responsibility in life. And I don't necessarily think Emma wouldn't, by the end of the novel, I don't think she wouldn't visit Harriet because of like a social status thing, because Mr. Knightley loves Robert Martin anyway. Like, they actually are kind of in the same circle by that point. I think it would be more that Harriet's situation in life would be so different. She would not have the time to accommodate Emma anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I go back and forth between like, is Emma actually a good friend, or does she think that she's a good friend? Because I think maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't really know, but I go back and forth.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel like she
It's really
really
hard.
does love Harriet, though. In like the way that she describes Harriet to other people, like sometimes I'm like, am I rooting for Harriet and Emma to be together? Because I'm like, she really fangirls over her sometimes. But I can get that. Like, I feel that way about some of my friends. I'm literally just like, this woman is a goddess. Like, what? Like, she deserves the world. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel that way. And I feel like for Emma as well, it's not even necessarily specific to Harriet, because I think she feels that towards Miss Taylor, like Mrs. Weston as well, and she managed to get a really good match with Mr. Weston. And I think she just wants the same for Harriet. She's just like, don't like just marry this one guy who's just proposed to you. Like, you could do really well, and you don't know what your family situation is. And I think Knightley's also true in the sense that he's like, most men aren't going to want to latch their bonnets to some woman who has no idea what her family situation is, who's only gone to Mrs. Goddard's boarding school.
Yeah.
But I think Emma's frame is from a woman's stance. Do you know what I mean? She wants the best for the women around her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. I think, I feel like my perspective, which may change, is that Emma's generally a good friend, but she just gets in her own way. like she has these, like, not even fits, but she has moments of selfishness and moments where she doesn't have perspective, and that kind of gets in the way of these friendships. But with Mrs. Weston, I don't think we ever see Emma being a bad friend to her. I think, like, Emma has her own opinions about Frank Churchill, who's like whether he's going to ever show up or not, and she kind of keeps them to herself because she knows it's going to affect Mr. Weston, and then out of deference to her friend's husband. And so I think she is a good friend. She just, like, gets in her own way in certain circumstances.
And I was also thinking, like, you mentioned that she was never a bad friend to Mrs. Weston. Even when you think about Jane Fairfax, even though we're constantly told over and over again that they do not like each other, Emma is never actually directly rude to Jane. Like the way that she is with Miss Bates, where at Box Hill, where she says something mean to her. It's like more of an internal, like, kind of confusion and dislike, maybe dislike, not even like a full-on hatred or anything like that. But it does kind of make me also think that she is a girl's girl, even if she doesn't totally love Jane.
And she empathizes with her as well for her situation all the
she
time.
She does. Actually, the times that she's mean to Jane, I think maybe it's worse that she talks about her behind her back before.
Yeah, that's
other
true.
than, because that's worse than, like, saying something to her face. But the times that she does that is like Frank Churchill egging her on. Like, he's the one who really encourages it. Because if Frank wasn't around, like, maybe she would say what she's thinking to Knightley, and then Knightley would drill some sense into her, and then at first she'd be petulant and like, meh, meh, whatever, but then she would probably think about it and be like, no, Knightley's right, like, I should take pity on her.
That's true.
I think that was such a good lesson learned for her as well, right? When it turns out that Frank was doing this whole facade the whole time, like, Emma is annoyed. She is like, how could he have treated her so badly? No wonder she hated me, because he was flirting with me in front of her, and I was flirting back because I had no idea. And I think, like, I love about Emma is that at the end she's not just like, oh, why would you go for Jane Fairfax? Like, ugh, like, no. That's not what her thing is. She is like, hang on a second, who does he think he is to pit me and Jane against each other and act in such a disgraceful way? Like, and Jane, agrees to work for the Smallridges and all this. Like, she's like, it's actually so wrong. It's so badly done and not what a gentleman should be like at all. And I think as well, like, she makes a great point to Harriet. She says, I lay it down as a general rule, Harriet, that if a woman doubts whether to not to accept a man or not, she ought to refuse him. If she can hesitate to a yes, she ought to say no directly. It is not a state to be safely entered into with doubtful feelings, with half a heart. And I think this is so true. And I think a lot of the time as well, we focus on Emma because I think we're meant to with the narrative, but equally, Harriet is... the woman cannot make up her mind about anything, okay? Like, you could be at the breakfast table and she'd, like, sit for 10 minutes deciding whether or not she wanted, like, butter or jam. Like, it's like, girl, just have both, okay? I'd have both. But you know what I mean? Like, she's just, like, so, like, in her head about everything. Every time do you remember the scene where she's at the shop, like, trying to decide whether or not the dress should go to the Goddards or to the Woodhouses? And it's like a whole thing. Like, I'm just, part of me is also like, I get, like, that people say Emma telling Harriet not to go for Robert Martin makes her a bad friend. I can kind of see that argument, but at the same time, I'm like, it doesn't take much to dissuade Harriet from it. And equally, maybe it wouldn't be right for Harriet in that moment to accept Robert Martin. I don't think she had enough life experience at that point in the book. I think she benefits from going on this whirlwind of a journey where she falls for these other men superficially and just is trying to figure it out. I actually think both of them benefit from going on this whole journey together.
That's so true. I think for me, as an anxious girly, if I'm confused about something super trivial and someone like my partner or my friend or whoever's around me that's like, just do this, I'm like, okay. And it takes all the stress off of me. I'm like, and now I don't have to think about it. Now I'll just do whatever she said and I'll trust her and it'll be fine. And that's kind of how Harriet is. It's not like she's like obsessed with Emma or like trying to like impress her. It's just that she truly, truly does not know what to do with her life. And so Emma's just like, here, let me help you.
That's so true. Because Harriet, if you imagine her, I mean, we're told she's like kind of simple and not that complex, but if you think about her situation, she doesn't know who her parents are, doesn't know what her future looks like. She's in this like girls' school that is probably fine, but not good enough to train her to be a governess or like one of the few jobs that women could take. And that's a very like anxiety riddled kind of situation. And then you encounter this person who's like rich and happy and pretty and charming, and they're like, oh, like these are all the things you should do. You're kind of like, okay, great, I'm gonna do that.
I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
And also, like, Harriet would be a fool not to take the opportunity of seeing what a connection like Emma Woodhouse could do for her. Like, we're not talking about nowadays where obviously like we're in this we are in a privileged position where we can marry for love and what have you. But back then, like people like Harriet were not in that position. Like she is a Charlotte Lucas character. So I think, and obviously I don't think she knows her own heart anyway, so couldn't work out whether or not she was in love with Robert Martin or not. But I feel like that, Robert Martin aside, I don't think there's anything wrong with Harriet looking at what her options might be and actually going along with Emma in seeing this. I think Emma was blind to Harriet's situation because of her own and didn't fully comprehend what Mr. Knightley could see. And I think that wasn't great. But at the same time, like, go Harriet. Like, she gets to go on this whole journey, have all of these life experiences she wouldn't have had before. Yes, it's painful and everything, but sometimes that makes you, right? Sometimes it's the worst of the boy situations that you have that really just, you know, make you more as a person.
Yeah, wait, this is making me realize so much about social interaction in Austen's novels, because in the current day, our romantic and platonic attachments are completely separated from our economics and like our financial situation. And that wasn't the case at the time. And we talk about this a lot when it comes to marriage and how, like, you know, obviously the famous first line of Pride and Prejudice, and Mrs. Bennet is like on the warpath to find her daughter as a husband, because that's their financial security. But I'm also realizing it comes into play with friendship too. And like what we think of now as networking, that kind of was a component of social interactions at the time, because you had to see like who, I mean, like, what's the lady at Rosings? Lady Catherine, like taking patronage of Collins and those kinds of connections. Like you have to kind of be strategic about even the people you talk to at a ball or the people that you go on walks with, because a friendship can't, for Emma, a friendship can just be a friendship. But for a lot of people, you know, it's going to be attached to these things of like, who can they introduce me to? Like, what kind of society can they have me be in? That is going to affect a lot of their like social interactions.
That's true.
Also, isn't it hilarious, like the whole situation with Elton thinking that he could shoot his shot with Emma, but then being disgusted at the fact that Harriet would shoot her shot at him? I'm like, can we not? Can we not?
I know.
So funny. I'm like, it's such a double standard, which I get because there was a double standard at the time. You know, it was a bit different. Although, like what you're saying about this, like the tying in of like economics with like networking, like your social circle, I actually think, given like a lot of the economies across the world, that we might actually be shifting more into that becoming the case again, just because so many people are just like struggling on just like, you know, normal paying jobs and everything. So I think I'm just noticing just in my own life, like the shift around people that I know where there is this more panic that you need to kind of pair up, especially if you want to do things like buy a house, or, you know, it's not as easy as it probably was.
Yeah.
I think we had a sweet spot before where people could, and we had the rights, you know, as women to go and like do all these things. But I think again now, like interdependence is becoming a necessity again in a really odd way.
It's also like priorities too. I feel like current friendships are like, okay, I am going to prioritize spending my extra money on going to a concert, but my best friend may not like that artist. And so you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, I want to go with her, but like, she doesn't want to spend her money on that either. So in that way, like economics does like not as much, but it does still kind of play a role in the things that you do with your friends in today's age.
Yeah, I think like in general, like we're saying like that Emma is more like us now, but at the same time, like we all still need money to live now. And Emma literally being like, I don't necessarily need to meet someone, I'm all set up for life. I'm like a lady of leisure, I can just do all my hobbies that I want to do. Like this is still a luxury that a lot of us like can't relate to, I suppose. Even if a lot of Emma's privilege we can, just because of the difference in like women's rights and things now. But again, I feel like that's subjective to where you live also. You know, there's so many situations where that's absolutely not the case. And it makes me think back to what you were saying, Shruti, at the start, where it was like Emma's like so progressive, like she's almost just so ahead of her time, that it's kind of interesting to see how probably at the time she was probably a pretty disliked character, probably seen as like a little bit snooty and snobbish. And then I think we moved into a time where she was like a bit more liked again. And then I feel like when I was at uni, there were so many people in my class when we were studying Emma who were just like, I hate Emma, I think she's a terrible person. It was so embarrassing because I'd gone first as well, and I'd be like ranting and raving how much I liked Emma and how much I found in common with her, and I was just like, I'll just sit back down now. Oh my god. It was like so embarrassing. But yeah, people really despised her again then. And then I'm feeling now that we're in an era where people are really gonna love this character. And like we saw that with was it the 2020, was it 2020 that Emma came out? My god, that's so ages ago now. Yeah, and like everybody loved that, right? They ate it up because it was like, it drew out this like aesthetic of Emma. I'm sorry, I feel like I just threw loads of stuff at you there, but like
Well, I think it's interesting because I struggle to kind of put Emma into this like category. Not that I think she's her own category in herself, but it's like she's kind of like this intersection between like an it girl and a mean girl that's hard to kind of eh, to like view her as a person. Like some people could see her as like, oh yeah, I really like her. Some people are like, oh, I really didn't like her. But she's kind of a both. She's kind of just like kind of this amalgamation of like stereotypes that it's hard to like categorize her into one specific character.
And I do think the thing that Emma doesn't get enough credit for is that she's willing to change. And she, like, the way that she is introspective is not what people would expect from her. Like, I think people would expect her to be self-obsessed rather than like self-improving. And she does. Like, she gets called out, and rather than getting defensive and lashing out, she like really thinks about it and is like, okay, maybe they're right.
Yeah. I think this is a great thing. What is this thing about Emma being like irredeemable in a way that someone like Mr. Darcy isn't, even though they're very, very similar characters?
Yeah, I think it's just similar to how like celebrities just like get canceled now and then they can never like bounce back up even if they apologize or like change who they are. It's like Emma was kind of cancelable in like the first half of the book, and she kind of said some problematic things, but like she eventually realizes her mistakes and grows into a better person, which is why she's so relatable, because like I see myself in the mistakes that she's made when she was younger, and as she grows older she's like, oh, I realized that this was wrong, which is makes her like this relatable nice main character that people can like.
I also don't know if I like read it in such a, like, I don't take her too seriously either. I feel like if you took everything that Emma said like super seriously, like she would come across as like some crazy tyrant and like really awful. But even that comment she makes about Robert Martin of being like, I couldn't have lost you to like the illiterate, like, I don't know if it's because I just like I have like maybe like a dry sarcastic humor, but like that is something that I would like say it's a joke to a friend, like not seriously like thinking that. And I, like I said, I love Robert Martin, so like I'd be absolutely like so happy if my friend found a Robert Martin in life. But yeah, I don't know, but I love this point that you're making about her, you know, this the likability or dislikability of Emma. And I also wonder, like, maybe people emphasize too much the Box Hill scene, which is pretty damning and is quite awful what she says to Miss Bates, and like how upsetting that comment is. But I feel like there's no, apart from that scene, for me personally, I don't see anything that Emma does that I'm like, that was so horrendous, like you can't come back from that. Like, I feel like her comment to Miss Bates, even though it was more public than this, was kind of on par to what Mr. Darcy says about Elizabeth Bennet being like, she's tolerable but like not handsome enough to tempt me. Like, it's mean, it's just a mean comment, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why it's so emphasized as this terrible thing.
Okay, well, you go ahead.
What I was going to say is that I think the difference between Emma and Darcy is that I think sometimes Emma says these things and has these mean streaks for display. Like, I think with Darcy, it just kind of comes out, or like he'll tell Bingley, but he's not like putting Lizzie on blast in front of everyone. In fact, whenever she does come up in a social context, obviously he's starting to fall in love with her, but he defends her to Caroline and whoever else is being mean. Whereas Emma, the Box Hill thing, she's like, it kind of comes off as like her trying to put Miss Bates in her place in front of everybody. And there is the scene, I can't remember if it's before, I think it's before, when they're playing the like Bananagrams like letter tile game, and she and Frank are like, like let's make Jane embarrassed in front of everybody, and then they give her the letters, and sure, maybe the other people playing don't understand what the letters are spelling out, but everyone can see Jane's reaction that she's been kind of like shown up in front of this social circle. And I think that is kind of where Emma's mean streak comes out, that it's like, okay, this is kind of terrible that you're doing this in a social setting. Like, that's the worst kind of embarrassment and humiliation.
This is such a great point. I totally forgot about the alphabet squares moment. So that was pretty damning. Like, that is pretty awful. I also don't agree with like embarrassing people publicly. I do agree. I think it's the most horrendous thing that you could do to somebody. Like, if you've got an issue, just like say to them privately. But like Emma, I feel like as well, like Emma knew those things were probably bad enough that she wouldn't say them privately. Like, she's not going up to Jane Fairfax and be like, "What's the crack with Mr. Dixon?" Or going up to Miss Bates and be like, "Can you just simmer down a little bit?" So like, she needed the audience to make it acceptable, and I agree. I think that's the worst thing about it.
And for me, because I was reading Emma for the first time this year, I didn't really know who Emma was, like based off all the adaptations and the rereads that people have done now. So when I read the first comments that she made about Robert Martin, I was a little bit like, oh, that's not a great look, Emma. Like, that's kind of rude and harsh. But I think now, knowing the kind of person that she is and that she grew to be by the end of the book, if I was to go back and read that, I would be on your page. I would be like, oh, I'm not going to take this seriously. But it being my first read, I was a little bit like, this is not great.
I think that's fair as well. Like, I think that's a great point that you made at the start as well. Like, it matters when you read these texts. And I feel like I benefit more reading a lot of them now because, like you said as well, you can see it in retrospect and you can empathize more with the characters like Emma because you can see your younger self, like elements of your younger self in Emma, and you're like, oh gosh, yeah, I said some daft things in the past as well. Like, totally like embarrassing. Or like you, where you've got caught up in something like with a character like Frank Churchill and you've blurted out something to a group and then after like totally felt terrible about it and you're like, oh my goodness, that was so awful, out of character, I didn't mean to do that. I feel like it happens when you're younger, and I feel like it happens when you're younger when you start to be exposed to more social situations quickly. Like the Box Hill situation, like that was like a full-blown event for Emma, right? She's not gone anywhere, and she's like going to this Box Hill, it's the most exciting thing ever. And so her like adrenaline would be so high, and she'd just be like just so animated that I feel like because maybe this is another reason that she maybe is quite performative in the sense that she goes around town and has to present herself a certain way, maybe that mask just slips slightly. And I don't think it's like fully a mask. I don't think she's totally pretending to be somebody else, but I think it obviously she just grew tired and just like said something that was like mean. And I don't think it's excusable because I agree. I think it's really cruel. And the Jane Fairfax thing is cruel as well. Like, but then equally, I'm just like, would Emma have done any of these things if Frank Churchill hadn't come in the picture? Not that it's like, again, excusable, but I'm like, this man.
Yeah, like when you're that young and somebody's egging you on to do something, like you're gonna do it. You don't know any better. Like you're gonna do it.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because so much of what we learn, I think Austen does this a lot in this book, especially of like giving us foils and contrasts with characters. And so much of what we know about Emma is by contrast. Like she's compared with Harriet, with Jane Fairfax, with Mrs. Elton. Like Mrs. Elton is a version of Emma, and I think it's like Mrs. Elton's snobbery at some point that maybe on some subconscious level Emma's like, oh god, like I can't be like that. And I don't really know what we learn about Emma through Isabella. I think that's an interesting relationship. We don't get as much of Isabella as the others, but with Frank Churchill, it's like he's bringing out this specific side of her that then kind of dominates whenever he's around.
Yes, agreed. And he does it for his own benefit, right? Like, I mean, realistically, he's so much worse because he's got this like secret engagement with Jane. Like, ugh, just terrible. And like Emma's like totally oblivious to all of this. She's just like thinks that they're having fun, and she's like excited because this is like the first person she's had like a crush on, which isn't much of a crush. I love when she like talks herself back out like into it and then back out of it.
Yeah,
She's
it's so
like in
funny.
24 hours. So like the start of it, she's like, oh my goodness, maybe I'm in love with this person. And at the end, she's like, I'm not sacrificing my life for this weirdo. That's not happening.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up the contrast too, because I think it's also important to look at the contrast of Emma from the beginning of the book and Emma from the end of the book too. Because I think it's like all these things that we're talking about, like Box Hill, her being mean to Jane and Miss Bates, and the bad stuff that she says about Robert Martin, like that stuff needs to be there in order to for us to appreciate who Emma becomes by the end of the book. Like we need to be able to see her mistakes, and we need to be able to see how she interiorizes them and apologizes for them like she does with Miss Bates. And then that's what makes her likable.
The thing that I think I give Emma credit for too, in addition to like her arc and her growth, is that she doesn't really hold grudges. Like she is really good natured. She takes a lot of Knightley's arguments and disses in very good spirits. And by the end, she could hate Frank Churchill because he really manipulated. Even if she wasn't in love, she was like, sure, if I'd been in love, it would have been different. But he takes advantage of her and manipulates her. And by the end, she's like, it's fine. Like, he's Mr. Weston's son. Like, Jane is his wife. I'll just be happy for them. And that is, I think, a pretty mature conclusion to come to. Like, I'd be mad.
Yeah, she has great emotional regulation like throughout the whole novel. And the fact that she's able to keep a lid on it with Miss Bates in general anyway. Like I know Miss Bates is a really sweet person, but I can imagine as well, like it would like drive me up the wall, like the constant chitter chatter from her, like just be intense. And she really feels for like what she does after that moment. Like there's a whole scene, like it's like a full page where she's literally in her head about it, and she's like, I hope, like hoping I might be forgiven. And she's just like, perhaps, you know, I was so scornful and ungracious in that moment. Like she really condemns herself. And I love what you said. Yeah, this like emotional regulation's in her great. She doesn't hold a grudge on anyone. She's just like, and that's another thing as well. Like when she has these debates with Natalie, this is why I don't take it too seriously, because I do this all the time as well. Like I'll go on like a full blown debate, like my life depends on it with someone, right? And then at the end of it, I'll just be like, okay, like, what are we having for tea? Or like, you know, I was like, oh, we're just the best of friends still, so it's all fine. And like for some people, like I've noticed this like in past relationships before, like because like if I've got like an argument on something and like they're coming back and it's like a two-way thing, like by the end of it, I'll just be like, okay, it's like 5 minutes for me and like turn around and like all good again. But for a lot of people, that's not the case, right? They're not flipping back around to being okay again really quickly. And so I can kind of like relate to like Emma's thing where it's like 1 minute she's in this heated like feminist debate with Mr. Knightley, and the next thing she's just like, so we're always friends. So like what we're doing, like we're playing backgammon, like that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm just trying to think. I mean, I really would love to like hear from someone who like really despises Emma. Like, I'd just love to know like what it is, like them to pull out all the points that like are really like awful about her. Because to me, I feel like she really does reflect so much that it doesn't become null and void, like what she says. Like it's still terrible stuff, but I just feel like she does get redeemed by the end of the book, and I feel like she's gone on this development. Right, the book is about her developing as a character, and like we see that. So sorry, that's me eating those chocolate buttons. Now it's making me all gassy. So lovely, so demure. We see this in other books, right, where we don't like condemn people the same way. Where people go on these like character arcs. How boring would the book be if Emma was perfect from start to finish, or awful from start to finish? Like it just wouldn't be enjoyable at all. Like we love it because we see this like character development, and I feel like it was quite popular back then to have these like coming of age stories. Like Charles Dickens is known for that as well, right? These like coming of age books where somebody grows up. Like I feel like Great Expectations is a great example of that as well. So I'm just like, yeah.
I think it's hard to dislike a character when you get to be with them and in their head and see their growth. But just for the exercise, I'll try to give a little bit of a contrarian view, which is I think one of the things that Emma doesn't mature, or like one of the aspects of her that doesn't grow, is her kind of desire to be idolized. I think this comes out in the first half to the middle with Harriet and Jane Fairfax, where it seems like a lot of what Emma resents or doesn't like about Jane Fairfax is just the way that she's treated by the society and lauded as this accomplished woman and all of this. And she kind of tells Harriet that she doesn't appreciate this, but Harriet idolizes Emma, and Emma's totally cool with that. And by the end, we can imagine that she might be better about that, but I think she's gonna still relish her role as like Queen of Highbury, like married to Knightley. They have these two big estates. They're kind of like in charge of a lot of the farming and like the property that's going on. I don't know if she will ever grow into a place of not enjoying that flattery and attention.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think it's one of my one of my favorite quotes is when she's having that conversation with Harriet and she's like, "Oh my goodness, Harriet, don't compare us. It's like comparing a lamp to sunshine." And I was like, that is the funniest thing in the world. It's just hilarious. But yeah, I do agree. At the same time, I'm like, is that an intense vice to have? I think it's a bit weird to be like constantly needing validation and approval from people. And I actually think that's her downfall. I think that's why she leans into these like people pleasing tendencies. I think a lot of her dismay about what she does with Miss Bates is because she can't bear the thought that people of Highbury will think she's a terrible person. And she's like, oh my goodness, like, I think she even makes a quote. She's like, as a daughter, she had hoped she would not be without a heart. And I think she has these labels on herself, like perfect daughter, mistress of like Hartfield. And I feel like if anything like that slips, it's like the end of the world for her, and she has to uphold these standards amongst everybody around her. And I feel like that's exhausting. I don't feel like that's like a natural way to be in life. And I feel like we see that slip with things like Box Hill, how she is with Jane Fairfax, the fact that she is influenced by Frank Churchill. Like we said, Emma's not stupid. Like realistically speaking, she probably could have had more discernment when it comes to someone like Frank Churchill, but she didn't because she got carried away. And I think a lot of that is because like she really like just has this need for other people to approve of her. And I do think that's a dangerous thing to have, because I feel like you can be swayed, and I feel like you can act out of character for the sake of other people's validation and approval.
Yeah, but I don't see like it being so dissimilar to bringing back the influencer, that girl aspect of Emma. If she was an influencer in today's age and she was getting married to Mr. Knightley, who, let's just say, he's also like this like fitness like guru on Instagram, and he's like
That
also
would,
has his
oh
own
my
following.
God, Knightley would hate that person so much. He would never be that person.
Honestly, I see it like this is a tangent, but I see it as like Emma being an influencer, Harriet being like a follower. I see Emma going on this live, like Instagram live of her doing like this weird thing, and Mr. Knightley commenting, being like, maybe it's time to go to bed. Maybe you should log off.
I just see him like not being on social media at all, and literally just like coming on and being like, "What are you doing? Why the camera out? Like, why are you sat there doing this?"
But let's just say, for this example, that Mr. Knightley also has his own following because he is rich and he has an estate in the Emma novel, right? I feel like in today's age, like people would relish in that too. It's like, oh, I'm gonna gain all this new following because I'm marrying this guy, and we're gonna have like all this shared wealth now. Now we can get like we can make our own like couples Instagram account, and we'll get like new followers. And so I kind of see it similar to that, where maybe it's not really a bad thing. Like it's just kind of like that's how she is. Like that's how influencers are, and that's what they look for, and that's how their brains work. That's kind of how Emma is as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I feel like that's maybe why it all kind of starts to crash and burn a little bit when like outsiders come in. Because I feel like it's only when people like the new Mrs. Elton show up, or like Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax, that it starts to crumble slightly, this like curated world she's created in maybe that is because she's literally just like, well, if it's not the usual people, the usual crowd watching me and supporting me, I can't take the kind of criticism or the actual critical eye watching me. Like Jane Fairfax, like for another reason, like Jane Fairfax can probably also see, she's like, wow, I'm like way more accomplished than this woman, and like I was taken as like an orphan. Like she's literally had all the opportunities in life, and she's basically squandered them. So I feel like Emma doesn't like the judging eye upon her, and I think that's part of also why she was kind of like clawing her way to the top with some of the moments later in the novel.
Yeah, and I can't really like condemn her or dislike her for any of these things because they're so real. Like at the end when she realizes she's in love with Knightley, she says something like, she can't bear to not be first in his eye when she thinks that he loves Harriet, or something like that. And it's like, okay, but that's real. Like you want to be first priority to your partner or whoever. And so it's like you can't even fault her for it.
I feel like we're so sympathetic for Emma. I love Emma, so like I knew this was going to be a
I
hard
love her
one.
so much. Yeah, I like
know.
even my attempt at being negative about her was so half-hearted. I was like, I can't fault her.
I know. It's just because we see ourselves so much in her. It's so hard to be like, no, she's not a good person, because then you're saying that maybe I'm not a good person. Yeah.
All the time, actually. Like, there's been so many instances where I've been like, oh, I don't want to tell someone that I like. Well, it was after that like uni experience probably traumatized me, where I was like, I see myself in Emma, and everyone's like, we hate Emma, and I was like, I just never going to speak up in class again. But yeah, I think it's hard. Like, I feel like there is still a bit of a stigma around liking Emma, or like feeling yourself similar to Emma, but she is so real. We all make mistakes, right? Like, life is not perfect, especially when we're growing up. There's so many ways that you like fumble and fall, and you're just figuring stuff out. And nobody's like, and apart from like Fanny, who's like going through life and lives in her internal world, if you're going to interact with people on a regular basis and you're going to be admired by people, like, it's gonna, you know what I mean, you're gonna stumble and fall at some points. And I feel like that is one of the consequences nowadays, like, you know, that cancel culture and things. Like, I feel like more than ever there's very little room for mistakes, especially in the public eye.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's not the same experience as some people have with Emma, that it's like there's this lack of tolerance for anything that's less than, you know, the perfect morals all the time.
Yeah, and another thing to say about Emma is that she very rarely or almost never victimizes herself. Like when people praise Jane Fairfax and she's like, okay, like I'm not great at piano, she's not sitting there making excuses for like, oh, but I didn't have the right instrument and I didn't have a good teacher and I didn't have the suffering that fueled my art the way Jane does. She's kind of like, yeah, I didn't practice. And she's like mad about it for a little bit because it's pulling attention from her, but she doesn't try to like recenter herself by victimizing herself.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, she always takes accountability things. Even with like the Mr. Elton thing, she like starts to like go back over it, and she's like, oh my goodness, like how could I have encouraged Harriet? Why didn't I see that he was interested in me, not her? Which also I totally get as well, because like Emma's like on such a different, like the fact that he shoot his shot with Emma was weird. Like, she ain't thinking that he's after him, for good reason. And and so like I do get it, like when she's like reflecting back and she's like, oh my goodness, it's terrible, she takes accountability. And I feel like isn't that one of like the cornerstones of just being like a decent person, is that you're able to take accountability when you make a mistake, you work on it. Miss Bates, she takes accountability. She listens to what Knightley says. She doesn't like just go back off on Knightley. Emma has money, she has position, she easily could literally just turn around and be like, I don't give a flying fig who I upset.
Mhm.
I can say what I want to. She could make some of those people in Highbury's lives hell if she wanted to, and she doesn't. She's a kind person at heart, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are my thoughts. Are there any other thoughts that you want to add? Are there any of the scenes that you want to go over that we've not touched on?
I don't have anything. I feel like I talked about everything that we wanted to talk. I mean, I could do a 3-hour episode about Emma. So at some point I need to cut myself off.
Well, this isn't really a question, but just an observation that just another reason that I love Emma is I think Emma's really sharp. Like, she's so sharp and quick. And how do you not love a heroine like that? Especially when you know that it's a patriarchal world and society. And it's like, she's just...
I think Austen is just good at writing characters like that. Like, I think Elizabeth Bennet is like that as well.
Isn't it interesting how admired Elizabeth Bennet is, but people like Emma are this more Marmite characters where people, you know, some people like dislike her, some people won't. Like, there's controversy around Emma. I think the same with Mary Crawford. I think Mary Crawford and Elizabeth Bennet have so much in common, and yet she is total Marmite. Like, some people despise her. I love her personally. So I'm like, it's really interesting, like how certain characters can have this polarizing effect where others don't. Like, Elizabeth Bennet doesn't seem to, yet she has some moments where she is mean. Like, sometimes I'm like, it's giving on par sometimes with, you know, the way that Emma is and Mary Crawford is. So I don't get the double standard there.
Yeah, in fact, if we are comparing her to Lizzie Bennet, I think Lizzie is a lot more biased and like has her own little bubble of what she thinks about things, much more so than Emma. I think Emma is more open to questioning things, and she's like thinking about how different things are interacting with each other. So yeah, it is interesting that everyone universally loves Lizzie Bennet, but Emma sometimes isn't given benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, now that I think about it, Lizzie is like so stubborn compared to Emma.
Stubborn and judgy.
Yeah.
And like, where does she get off? No offense to Lizzie,
Yeah.
but like, girl, you got no money and no prospects. Like, you are like, you need to chill out. Like, at least Emma's got like, she's literally like, I've got £30,000, and like, my dad is happy for me to stay at home forever. Like, he'd prefer that. So like, I'm good. Like, fairs. Like, join me. I guess
Yeah,
we get Lizzie.
and Lizzie is so mean to Charlotte. Like
Right?
people talk about
Yeah.
Emma and Harriet, but I think Lizzie's way meaner to Charlotte than Emma is to Harriet. Like Emma obviously has, if you compare the two proposal or like marriage things, obviously Emma has her own idea of like, I'm not gonna influence you, like, and she's like posturing a little bit, but she is also like, no, you should decide for yourself. And even when she does push her own agenda, she does it in a way that's like not horrendous, but the confrontation between Lizzie and Charlotte, like Lizzie's like, how could you? Like he's awful. Like what are you talking about? And it really affects their friendship for a while until they're able to like actually hang out in person. And even then, I feel like there's a little bit of a distance between them that maybe wasn't there before all of that happened.
Yeah.
Because she says after the fact as well. Like, it's one thing going to your friend for advice before
Yeah.
this whole thing's happened, before you've accepted something. But imagine going to your friend after you've accepted a proposal and then they come down on you. Like, how could you possibly do
Yeah.
that? That guy's a buffoon. Also, he was proposing to me 24 hours ago. Like, it's just things you don't need to hear in that moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's intense. And yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like there's so many instances where, and I know she has reason to think that Darcy's a bad person. That's why she dislikes him and is mean to him. But there's actual moments where she is really mean, like in a way that I'm like, this can't even be socially acceptable at this point to just be like, so it's when they're dancing together and she's like berating him for like all these things that he has no idea. I'm just like, this can't even be socially acceptable at this point. So I'm just like, it's so funny that people give her such a pass in a way
Yeah.
that Emma, Mary Crawford, like there's so many other women characters who are condemned for mistakes or like moments of, like for Mary Crawford as well, like a lot of what she's like, the worst things that she says, about like Tom being dying would be better for like her situation, like an Edwin's situation, and it would have been better if Fanny married Henry Crawford. Her whole life is like partially blown up as well, so like she's saying these things in like the heat of the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like intense moments. I don't think they're good things to say, but she says them in the heat of the moment. Whereas Lizzie, a lot of the time, like nothing's happening to her directly, but she still feels the need to like
To like go off.
go off on one.
I wonder if it's because Pride and Prejudice is like a true like romance, so we're not really judging Mr. Darcy or Lizzie Bennet as characters. We're just kind of like rooting for them to end up together. But Emma, even though it is somewhat of a romance with Mr. Knightley, I feel like 90% of the book is really about Emma, and it's like the last bit, like when Mr. Knightley like, comes in, and that part is the romance. So her character and who she is like more up for criticism because of that.
Yeah, and also as well, like this time when I was going back through for this episode, I realized how much more the book is centered just around the community in general. Like I used to think of it as just like really focused on Emma, but there's actual chapters that focus specifically on other characters, like Mr. Weston and his situation with Frank. Like there's moments where we're totally not with Emma and we're just looking at the whole, I mean, really probably a better name for it would have just been Highbury. Like that probably would have been a better name for the book. So I agree. Yeah, maybe that's true, but like in Pride and Prejudice we are very like plot focused. We're not focusing solely on the characters, whereas we kind of have to in Emma because they're in the Goldfish Bowl. We're not traveling anywhere else. Like we're kind of there with a magnifying glass, like observing them. As they like go through life. I always think that with like Box Hill as well, like the fact that it's like called Box Hill, like and they're like in a little box, even on the hill. I was like, it's so funny. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I'm really going to be interested to hear what the listeners are going to think as well. Please let us know, guys. What do you think of Emma? And if you have some, really intense arguments about how much you dislike her, I mean, all three of us can pop back on and we can we can discuss.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
We can definitely address it. But I guess in general, I feel like we've picked up on some of the reasons why. But I think this was great. I really enjoyed it. And I'd love for you guys to just chat a little bit about the Novelties podcast and like what you guys do on there, why you started it and everything, just so my listeners know and they can come over and find you.
Yeah. So as you probably have picked up by now, Neha and I have been friends for a long time. We met in middle school and we always like kind of read the same books. I feel like half of our conversation and just like socializing was reading books and talking about them. But then more recently, we kind of felt like we wanted a space to be able to read different kinds of books than just the ones that are celebrated popularly. I think we get like a few books that are constantly talked about and put on this pedestal and appreciated, and a lot of other books for different reasons that aren't. And there really isn't a space to have that kind of discussion or exploration. I think like academia has its own issues and is famously gate kept and very kind of like restrictive and rule based, and frankly like kind of boring. Like I have read academic papers and like sure they're interesting, but they're boring. Or you kind of get like, I'm sure book club is great in theory, but I'm sure everyone's been part of a book club where nobody read the book, and after 5 minutes you're like talking about something else. Or Goodreads where people are like, I hated this book because I'm in a bad mood. So really it just was like we wanted a space where we could have these like fun but also thoughtful and analytic discussions about different books from around the world, from diverse authors, and make sure we are really opening our eyes and everyone else's eyes to different literary traditions. And yeah, so that's the novelty. And we did Emma this year. Izzy came on our podcast to discuss Austen adaptations, which was super fun. It was our first Austen for the podcast, so we had a lot of fun. But we have several seasons with different, like speculative fiction around the world, and yeah. What else?
We don't only talk about we don't focus on Jane Austen on our podcast, but weirdly it comes up a lot.
It comes
for,
up so often.
Yeah, like we're like constantly comparing things to Austen, or even just like classic novels in general. So yeah, we're a bit broader than Jane Austen, but if you love Jane Austen, I feel like you would still enjoy listening to our podcast because it, like I said, it comes up a lot.
No, definitely. And I feel like so many people who listen, they just love bookish podcasts in general. So I feel like it's definitely ones to go and listen to. Also, what I love about your podcast is it's so chill. Like it feels so calm. Like in comparison, like I probably sound a bit chaotic on this one sometimes, whereas that one I'm like,
No.
I feel like I could like have like a face mask on and just be like lying there and just like relax and listen. So I kind of love that as well. I feel like it's a good Sunday listen. Where you can just like relax and chill, have a cup of tea. So yeah, definitely. I love this so much. And can you say what's coming out next for you guys, or like what have you got planned for the rest of the year? Do you have anything Jane Austen planned for the 250th anniversary?
Well, I think that the Emma episodes we did was kind of our 250th, which unintentionally, like we were like, let's do Emma, and then a few months later we realized it was the 250th anniversary. We were like, perfect. So we have, if you want Austen content to like ease your way in, we have an episode about Emma, and actually the themes we picked are very relevant to this discussion. We talked about community, companionship, and autonomy. And then we did an episode just for the screen adaptations. We did an episode with Izzy about all of Austen adaptations. So that's like kind of our Jane Austen stuff. And then we are wrapping up our adaptations season. We did like 11 books, I think we counted.
Yeah, it was
and
insane.
12 movies or shows. It was a lot. There's a lot. And then we are going to have season 6 coming out in the fall, which I don't think that we're announcing the theme yet, but
It's in the works.
It's a secret. But but we do announce all that stuff on our Substack newsletter and our Instagram.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
you can
Do you
follow
want to give
us.
people the handle? Yeah, the handle for those.
Yeah, and our Instagram handle is thenovelty.pod, and our Substack is called The Novelty Newsletter. Our novelty newsletter is probably one of my favorite side projects besides the actual project. Except for the actual podcast, we do like one newsletter each a month, plus a paid newsletter where we talk about just books that we read that month, or shows, TVs, shows, movies, whatever it is. And I think me and Shruti just love analyzing literally anything and everything that we come across on daily life. So we kind of put that into our newsletters.
I love this. I need to sign up for your newsletter. That sounds so fun.
It's a lot of fun. It's very nerdy. In a recent one, we're getting into Aristotle. So
Yes, I love it. Yeah, I'll definitely sign up for the newsletter. I love that kind of thing. So yeah, but it was so good chatting you guys and doing this character study. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And that is everything from us today. I will see you in another episode.
Bye.